Mame fa say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there o say dem yopo.
For vetting for John Dramani Mahama's ministerial nominees na ekoso each and every day. And Mr. Afenyo-Markin aji fire ya to fire be the abreno according to Mr. Kwesi Pratt, you know. Mr. Afenyo-Markin on jai comedies na or your platform so na platform notice no a platform be a here Ghana for year and I say very 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 vital and hot no baby comedies na they on jai comedy no na on straight to the point near who Jumadi no emphasis ye na I have PENDREAM TV as usual no be subscribe to the channel. Today is the first time I'll be share content there. Subscribe now for me notification bell and the content will be too much. You'll be the first person all the time. When I'll be the first person I'll be share your content. Now message also I'll show we are now what's a share video no send be call chilema afofro nsa be ka bi yenko hwe Mr. Fifi Pratt brody anu yi kese we ma Mr. Afenyo-Markin according to no baby a huge platform more on Jaisa agrudi na grown so too much yengo see honembra.
Right now the ministers have been announced. I don't see any circumstances under which any of them will be disqualified by Parliament. If it happens, it will be strange, you know. And I think it's important for us to look at the history of parliamentary vetting. Massa, you are a member of Parliament. And this is a novelty. In the past, we were not vetting our ministers. Okay. At the time when we had the parliamentary system of government, purely parliamentary system of government, I don't remember us vetting ministers in Parliament. At the time that we had a purely presidential system, I don't also remember. I think this came about when we had a merger between the presidential system and also the parliamentary system. Yeah. Now I can understand why when we had a purely parliamentary system there was no vetting. Because the vetting process is supposed to look at whether or not persons nominated are qualified, you know, to be ministers. And when we had the parliamentary system, it was clear that the utmost qualification for ministerial position is qualification to be member of Parliament. It was then assumed that if a person was a member of Parliament, that person need not go through another vetting process.
Right.
Now we have a hybrid situation where people are coming in who are not members of Parliament, and therefore a lot of people think that it is right to check their bona fides. Is that how they say it? Their bona fides or bona fides, whatever. Fide, yeah. You know, to check those. I have no problem with that, except that a lot of times the process of vetting appears to be completely abused. And when you have people sitting on the parliamentary vetting committee using that process for self-vindication, I think it's an abuse of process. You know, when you have the process being used, you know, to justify previous political stances and so on, I think it's an abuse of process. And then I've also worried over this period about the lack of rigor in the vetting. I witnessed one vetting process where somebody who had been nominated as a minister was asked, "Do you go to church?" And then the person said, "Oh yeah, I go to church." "Oh, you must therefore know how to sing hymns." I said, "Oh, I sing hymns." He said, "Can you sing a hymn for us?" I mean, this is preposterous. And this is happening in the view of all of us. Is that how to vet ministers? They come and sing Methodist hymns and you approve them. Are you vetting them as choir masters or what? I mean, absolutely strange. And yesterday, was it yesterday? I think yesterday, something similar happened. You know that the what do you call it? Your orders, you know, your regulations, standing orders and so on, prescribes the language that ought to be used in Parliament.
Yes.
So that language ought to be used in the sittings of all parliamentary committees. Unfortunately, I saw the minority leader use language which is not prescribed. And his excuse was that, oh, we've seen in your CV that you speak a number of languages, and we are testing your proficiency in those languages. Where did that come from? Is that why we set up the vetting committee? Has that become the new Ghana Institute of Languages?
Yeah.
What is this? So look, the vetting committee should stick to its mandate. And its mandate is just to find out whether persons nominated by the president are qualified to be ministers. And perhaps also look at their ability, intellectual and so on, to execute the functions which are assigned to them as ministers, and stop the comedy. I think the comedy sometimes is too much.
Yeah.
The comedy is too much. And unnecessary misuse of the platform to draw attention to some people and so on, it's sickening. I'm told that one person lasted 6 hours in the vetting. How? What would justify that? 6 hours.
That's interesting. Collins, I'm sure that Mr. Kwesi Pratt's concerns are concerns that I'm sure you've heard in some other quarters as well. I mean, the casual nature of the vetting process, it looked too friendly. It wasn't as thorough as one would have expected. And also, at some point, it was beginning to look more like you scratch my back, I scratch your back-ish kind of thing, It's too friendly, and that these are people who are being paid with the taxpayers' money to go and do a specific job for us. We want to be convinced that the person these are people who are going to be running our lives, in somewhat. And so we have to be sure about whether they are really the right materials or they are actually cut out for that job. And so when you're sitting with people and you're asking about whether they can sing hymns and, asking them about whether they can speak certain kind of languages and so on, it doesn't make us feel as though you will smell the coffee, the times in which we're in. When some very, very, very deep, economic, circumstances. And so we ought to be able to know the mood of the people and take the work we're doing as parliamentarians, or take the work that you're doing as parliamentarians much more seriously. I don't know what you think about this.
Sometimes doing vetting, and when the tension is just too much, you have to find a way of just diffusing the tension. Now, with a specific reference to the tree, one of the things that happens at the vetting is to scrutinize the CVs. Now, on the CV of Mr. Haruna, he had indicated that he speaks 4 languages. He speaks English fluently, he speaks Twi, Dagbani also, he mentioned, and Hausa also. So the minority leader sought to just scrutinize the CV, and I asked him a question, whether indeed, as he put there that he speaks Twi, whether he can speak Twi. I'm not too sure that is out of place. Totally.
But also how important is that?
I'm coming.
Okay.
Sometime during vetting, as I said,
okay,
you after the hard questions and going into deep technocrat issues, sometimes you just have to soften the grounds, make the nominee comfortable, allow him to relax a bit before you start hitting the person with all those things. So sometimes these things are done just to calm nerves down. And you could realize that a lot of the people burst into laughter when the minority leader said he knows where his tree is coming from. And then he said, oh, of course, my wife is in Ashanti. So I think sometimes it's not out of place necessarily to bring calm the tension down. But I agree with you that it's a very serious business. It's a serious business because you are going to head an education ministry. You are going to head the finance ministry. The decisions you take as a minister affect everybody.
These are consequential ministries.
Absolutely. Yeah. It affects everybody. Yeah. And so it's important that you go deep to ensure that the person really understands where he or she is being taken to.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, as for qualification to be a minister, once you're a member of parliament, you qualify to be a minister.
Yeah.
Because the constitution is quite clear
that
the qualification to be a minister is somebody who qualifies to also be a member of parliament. It's there, it's quite clear. So that for qualification, and you realize that sometimes when I was going for my vetting, the chairman was like, once you're a member of parliament, you first qualify. However, this process is to test your understanding of where you are going to and all that. So, Uncle, I'll just please, sometimes I think these are things that are done.
I'm not PENDREAM TV. Now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.